going. We're recording live from facebook.com/Lillian's radio show. So for those of you who are listening to us or watching us on YouTube, you know you're always invited into the live classroom. Today we have Robert Scott Bell. Any of you who know Robert Scott Bell know that he dives into some other things that I feel very uncomfortable. You know, I don't talk politics and I don't talk sports, and he's really good at both. So, and all the stuff we talk about in the classroom. Love Robert Scott Bell. So today we're going to be talking about the latest on the coronavirus, because he researches all the different angles when it comes to politics. We're going to probably have to talk a little bit of politics today, but not too much, as if you want to hear more, you can always tune into Robert. But you know what? At this point, Robert, anything goes. You know, we're going to be talking about freedom and what this is all about. So fasten your seatbelt, because we're going to learn and grow together. Hey, Robert, it's time to dance. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn. We make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be. I'll be right here, right here. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for you.
This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friends. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are new to the Lillian McDermott Radio Show classroom, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friends on facebook.com/Lillian's Radio Show. And soon we're going to be broadcasting on YouTube, and because of my friend, Robert Scott Bell. He is just amazing. And so we're broadcasting live, and the purpose is for us to embrace a new truth and live the life of our dreams. Lately, I've been saying this coronavirus stuff is a nightmare, but we need to make the best of it. And we also need to stay ahead of the game. We need to stay on top of things, because there's a lot of information out there that may or may not be real. There's a lot of information out there that may be purposely set there for to distract us. And we need to be awake. We need to wake up. And who else other than freedom fighter, health nut, and liberty expert, Robert Scott Bell, radio show host as well, to help us kind of go through this, what's right, what's not, weed out all this stuff, the latest with the coronavirus that we need to know, because it's affecting all of us in so many different ways. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Robert Scott Bell is here to do just that. Welcome back, Robert.
Thank you, Lillian. I just showed up to watch you. Honestly, I didn't come to say a thing. I'm happy to be here, looking at your beautiful smile, making me feel all happy. So I'm just going to hang out, relax with you. So no, you tell me if there's any particular issues that are coming up for folks that, you may have been covering a lot of things. Of course, I do this 2 hours a day plus 6 days a week. And I have to get into sometimes the mud, if you will, of politics, not because I'm partisan in any way, but just to kind of call out anybody who would kind of try to disempower us or frighten us, to change our behavior through fear. I'll have to call them out. And again, it's nonpartisan in that sense, but we have to recognize where the origin points are of fear, which is a great immune suppressor.
Yes.
And that could make us vulnerable to any and all things, least of all this COVID-19 scenario, which, we can't ignore at this point. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you are, because, I've said this before to you that, there are other people who do politics a lot better and sports a lot better than I could ever do. And so you've been doing this for such a long time. What, you're going on 20 years now?
21 years now.
21 years. And I know that I've met you probably 5 years or more ago.
Yeah, at least.
And it's always nice to see you at the events and to see you with a mic. And the last time we were together, you interviewed me in your classroom. I still want to get a copy of that. So
it's up there. So
is it?
Yeah, of course, nothing goes away. And as we said, and it's really not me, it's Super Don, my humble and lovable producer out of Oregon, has connected us with this ability to stream out to multiple formats. And, right now, many of our friends who have been relying on one format, it's very easy to be censored because of controversy, right?
Yes.
And you don't even know if you're stepping into controversy today. I mean, you could stay away from politics and all that, and then suddenly somebody said, well, you covered a subject, we don't like that, and you get docked and you're out. So I think the safe bet, if you will, it's not even a bet, is just to say, let's get it out to as many formats as possible. Yep. So if one goes down, there'll be 20 others and we'll be fine.
Yeah. And also, I'm always asking people to subscribe to the channel at whenyouneedafriend.com, because you never know when all of a sudden that freedom of speech will be taken away through censorship. And so with that in mind, we always need to stay connected. Like-mindedness, we can do a lot more together than by ourselves. So Robert, with everything that's been happening, we've been I'll catch you up. In the classroom, what we've been talking about is building our immune system. I had Dr. Lorraine Day, who opened a can of all the stuff that you talk about, which is the conspiracy, the Illuminati, all the different things.
She went deep.
Oh, she went so deep. And she's coming back on next week, because I want to talk solutions. I didn't like how I felt.
Yeah.
That disempowerment of not knowing what to do. So with everyone who is in the classroom, and I'm hoping that everybody's in the front seat today, that we are little by little waking up, learning that this is, according to Dr. Day, psychological warfare is what she called it. And so with that in mind, if we wake up and we say, okay, let's wake up from this nightmare and let's be real. Let's take the red pill and let's talk about what's the latest. So some of the things that we've been hearing, the myths, the rumors, the things that they're overcovering that are not real, the things that are being undercovered or reported on that are that need to be out there. So one of the things that I've heard, Robert, is that this COVID-19 has been altered, and that there is SARS, HIV, Ebola, and it just doesn't sound like, okay, everybody that would ever think that is like, oh my gosh, that's a conspiracy, you're a whack job. How true is this? Have you been able to research this?
Well, the only thing I've seen validation on is the genetic sequencing of bat DNA into this virus. Bat, B-A-T. And there's been evidence proffered from the lab in Wuhan, as well as a North Carolina, I think, bioweapons facility, if you will. This is the biotech research that involves manipulating viruses to see if they can create weapons, in a sense, or develop vaccines before it becomes a problem. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. So as far as people that claim that there's HIV in it, I call them out on their, I'm sorry, it's just straight BS. You are uninformed, because there's no such thing as an HIV test. And when you hear that, you're like, what do you mean, Robert? Well, the fact of the matter is that test is so nonspecific and cross-reactive that you can name it anything. There's 120 things that you could test positive for. So how is that a test for HIV? There's no standard. And that a medical test with no standard is not a test.
Yes.
So there are a lot of confusion. And so when you start throwing other things out, you can easily discredit everything. So there may be validity to this being a manipulated virus in some way. Okay. Having said that, Does it mean that it is a disaster and everybody's going to die? No, as we've seen so far, the most vulnerable among us are still the most vulnerable among us before this virus and after. It hasn't changed. The elderly on multiple medications, immunocompromised individuals, people with pre-existing conditions of any and all kind, they're vulnerable, but they've always been vulnerable. So are we to say because of this new virus, real imagined, it almost doesn't matter because perception becomes reality,
Yes.
that we have to shut down our way of life? We have to stop interacting with one another. We have to look at one another as vectors of disease or even death.
Correct.
And that's, to me, the scariest component of everything. And I know you get this, that we now, instead of look at one another as souls on a divine journey together on this planet, wanting to uplift one another, help one another, laugh with one another, love, affection, all of the things that are part of the human need for being here and being healthy, are now removed from us as being too dangerous. And that could alter our future in a very negative way that is much more dangerous than any virus, COVID-19 or any other. And in fact, if we shut down the economy because of it, the deaths that will ensue simply because of starvation
Yes.
is gonna make the COVID a nonsense story. So we are overreacting to even something that could be real, because every case that they claim is a COVID death, they have no evidence to say definitively that the COVID had anything to do, if much less being a contributing factor. And these are distinctions that have to be made. This is not denialism of the potential of a real virus. It's just recognizing the limits of validation, and where they aren't validated, I'm calling them out.
Okay, and before I ask you my next question, I want to remind all of you who are in the classroom right now that if you have a question for Robert or myself, type in a Q and then write your question down, because I know many of you make comments, and I really want to take advantage of the fact that we have Robert in the classroom and be able to ask as many questions as possible, and as well have a conversation that is fearless, that it is about facts. And I know, Robert, that these are facts that you have researched, and any time that you can reference a location, I'd appreciate it, because I want all of us to research the facts. I want all of us to say, I didn't just hear Robert or Lily say it, I researched it myself, and now it's my truth. That is so important in anyone who is following anyone. So with that in mind, type in a Q, and then that question, whenever we have a little break, we'll ask that question. Okay, so validity. You talked about that there isn't an AIDS test, that there isn't, that you challenge that rumor that's out there, which I'm so grateful that you were able to respond to that as well. The validity of the coronavirus test, as I understand and I've researched, there's an 80% variable. Now, is that a fact or is it fiction? And how are people using this 80% that is a false positive, false negative? How are we to use that and know that these were people that really had COVID-19?
Well, even if it's 50%, and I've heard the 80% number relative to the number of cycles they run the test, how you're interpreting the test, the reagents you use. There's so many factors that if you get any one of them wrong, you have no idea what you're coming up with. And there's also a difficulty to near impossibility of determining quantitatively what you're finding. Like if you take a fragment of unknown genetic material and amplify it hundreds of billions of times to say it's there, what does that say about there? How much is there if it took that much of a Herculean effort to find even that it may be there? So there are issues even if you have a real positive, whatever that is or however it's defined. But yeah, there's a analysis of the test. In fact, we just covered on the show today, 50% of the tests were contaminated with coronavirus already out of the gate. You don't even get a chance to try and get a real test. So subject to interpretation, however, you cannot rely on these tests, even if they identify the presence and maybe they're accurate from time to time. It still doesn't determine quantitatively how many of these viruses are actively replicating, causing problems in your system. So then they claim you died of it if you got hit by a bus and the driver happened to have COVID. I mean, that's how crazy it's getting.
Yeah.
You just assume you got a cough, you're elderly, it's COVID. And I covered two stories today on the air where they were pronouncing one in England, a famous 21-year-old died tragically, and they said it was a COVID death. and it turns out she had a heart attack and she was tested twice and there was no COVID found. So, after the fact, how does this work? And then another case out of New Orleans, a young person they said was perfectly healthy, or maybe had some pre-existing conditions, but died waiting for a coronavirus test, as if she was in line at the DMV and died because she couldn't get and then they turns out they report on that later. Yeah, she died, but there was no evidence that she had coronavirus. So this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I laugh at that because it's all about the headlines. And being someone, you also have written for, I've written for Floor Today. I don't know if you've ever written for Floor, but I know that you write for publications as well, that, the title is so important. And the title may not, or the headline may have nothing to do with what's being written about. Like it'll plant the seed, because maybe somebody just reads the title and all of a sudden they make up the story within the story. And so you have to really look into, and one of the examples I'd like to offer is the chloroquine, that all the deaths from, the president of the United States saying that this is hopeful, that the testing on chloroquine is hopeful. And then the next thing you know, the headlines are reading, people are dying from chloroquine, treatment. And then you go into 6 or 7 deep in, it'll say it's a derivative of chloroquine that's used to clean fish tanks. So expand a little on these headlines and why we have got to read beyond the headline.
Well, for that very reason, a headline will say one thing and the body of the article will say something completely opposite. But it's there to, what we say, alter reality for us. It plants a seed in our head so that we are in fear. And of course, anybody in fear is easy to be manipulated, because you're not thinking critically anymore. You're in a panic mode, fight or flight, and that's
which explains chemotherapy and radiation.
Sure, yeah, to frighten you into doing something that can kill you. Why would you do that?
Correct.
Or in the case of a coronavirus test, I mean, what other product would you buy that 50% of the time or 80% of the time it doesn't work? I mean, it's ridiculous. Yet we kind of give a pass to the medical community because it's a test. They say it's a test, and I just don't happen to kind of accept that on face value. I want to go in and let's see how you validated this thing to determine it. And even if it is real, what is it actually saying? Is it saying what you say it's saying, or is it not? And you're just creating a narrative out of that to create the fear and to shut down the economy for ulterior motives, perhaps.
Yes.
If you get into what Lorraine Day is probably relating. But I agree with you. When we talk about these things, we're always talking in terms of, well, not to live in that fear, but to say, what are the opportunities given this scenario where the vast majority of people are falling for this, right? The vast majority of the people would be grateful if Donald Trump said, hey, the government's going to provide chloroquine for everybody. And I'm like, I'm not going to oppose to that. I'm going to go, if you feel better, that's already a placebo benefit. I'm not going to take chloroquine. I'm going to take, herbs and homeopathics and minerals that may duplicate what they're trying to do with the synthetic form of quinine, for instance. That was where homeopathy got its start, with cinchona, or China, the homeopathic remedy, funny enough. And, we're going to go a different path, but it's indicative of, there are botanicals that they derive drugs from, and then the drugs get all the play because we live in the United States of Drug America. The Church of Pharmaceutical Mysticism is our religion. We might go to church once a week, but the rest of the week we're worshiping with doctors.
Yeah.
And we don't realize it. And of course, if that's where people are, give them the drug, make them feel better. Hopefully most of them live, and fine. And then we now are finding more and more people, including doctors, looking our direction, going, you know what, those herbs, those supplements, we don't have a vaccine. They should have waited for a vaccine to be out, then do this whole scaremongering. But I think they're planning long range for next season to go, remember that last year? We can prevent it this year. We've got the vaccine. And people are going to blindly go, okay, whatever you want to do. I'm not, you're not. But we are going to see now, because they don't have that, part of their backfiring of their plan is that more people than ever are discovering silver, right? Colloidal silver, silver hydrosol. More people than ever are just looking zinc, selenium, other herbs, beta-glucan. So it's to the benefit of those who have been long-standing saying, hey, you know what? We need to support our immune system with food and minerals and things. And so they can't contain that as much as they don't want you to say what these things actually do. I can and do, because I don't sell any of that stuff. That's why I'm very direct and outspoken on what to do, why I wrote that article at my webpage, robertscottbell.com, of what I'm doing to help alleviate fear for those that don't want chloroquine.
And you're doing such an amazing job with that. And so that's the conflict that we're hearing. The conflict is going to be, and I don't know if you know Dr. Thomas Lodi, but he
I know
came
Dr. Lodi.
on. Yeah, and he came on. He's been a couple of times. He's become a regular in the classroom here, and he calls it allopathetic. And I thought, gosh, I've never heard it placed, and listen, there are a lot of well-meaning doctors out there, great doctors that have been taught how to prescribe medications. But that doesn't get to the root cause. And of course, we want to get to the root cause. And it's nice to know that there is an herb or a homeopathic remedy, such as, what did you call it? Quinine?
Well, what, quinine, which is
Quinine.
cinchona. That's how homeopathy got its start. Interestingly enough, Hahnemann, and 220 plus years ago now, had identified the cause. If people who ingested this quinine substance from the cinchona bark, if they ate too much, that created symptoms that mimicked malaria, fever, etc. And then he converted it via serial elution and succussion into a homeopathic medicine. And so people around the world that live in malaria regions will have quinine in their soda water as a preventive, for instance. And that's why tonic water, although a lot of it's preserved now, but the idea is that substance is medicinal benefit, and they synthesize it into different forms of drugs for different things. And then they find, oh, it may have some benefit in suppressing a virus, or for instance, but there's always a side effect or number of side effects that weren't there in the natural world when you synthesize something. So we tend to I have a bias, obviously, toward nature and natural substances as opposed to isolating and synthesizing. So that's just one example of an option. But also to talk about allopathetically, I would argue that the vast majority of these so-called COVID-19 deaths are actually caused by what we call iatrogenic cause. In other words, the doctors trying to do heroic things, meaning well, their drugs suppress, mask, they're toxic, and they are the third leading cause of death, according to peer-reviewed medical literature for 30, 40 years now. It's been known. So why would this be any different for people who are elderly? You add another drug in a triage scenario, you're trying to help them to live, but unfortunately there are unintended consequences perhaps. And you end up dead, and then they say, well, it's the COVID-19, not the treatment.
Correct.
Just like chemo, right? It's the cancer, it's not the chemo, but it's really the chemo.
Exactly. And so this is what's happening, is that people don't realize that people die for taking the right medication, the right dose at the right time. It just did not respond to that individual. It was an overdose for that individual. I mean, I give the example that if somebody gives me codeine, my DNA converts it into morphine. So I cannot take anything with codeine. Not that I'm fortunate enough that I've not needed it, but at least I know that about my DNA. Some people don't know that. And then they get the codeine, and because it's over the counter, and they overdose on it. So we need to know that even without a virus, being treated can kill somebody. That could be the side effect, is death.
Very
and
good.
So that's something that we just need to, and today's class is not about rehashing fearful images. It really is to empower you to bring it down, to take that fear and turn it into, curiosity, and say, what is it that they're trying to do here? Why would it just doesn't add up to me? And here's something, and I'm going to share something personal, that family is turning against each other because maybe they perceive you as not caring. I am not saying that the coronavirus isn't out there, that is not dangerous. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm saying that the fear that is being placed within us, and that division, because we are a people that need to be together. We need to have a tribe. It's what creates people's peace of mind and feel like you belong. And it's all being taken away, and people are turning against you from that. So, a little bit about this fear when it comes to the people that we're trusting, like Anthony Fauci, how it's clear to me, and I'm just looking on the outside, I'm not even looking at the political side, that there is an agenda for vaccination. Because it seems like everything that's presented, oh, no, but we're working on a vaccine. but no, 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 no. So what would you like to say? What are some of the myths? What are some of the things that we need to know?
Wow, you bring up a lot, and I think that the connectivity and the discussions that you're having, and the unfortunately the antagonistic responses from family, even friends, who believe you're not caring enough because and these are
That
misinterpretations,
I'm
and they're
sending out misinformation.
right,
Yeah.
but they're misinformed and they're overreacting because they're not listening to what you're actually saying. Because neither you nor I are saying there's no such thing as this
Correct.
virus. I listen, whether it's real or not is not my discussion point here. The reality is, if we are led through the fear of the virus to act and behave the way we've been now kind of told we must, we could end up in much worse circumstances. In fact, we will end up in much worse circumstances than had we just kind of went along and now looked at each other as potential or actual enemies because we're afraid of what you might carry, what you might cough and sneeze, so that now our fellow man, woman, and child becomes vectors for disease and death. I don't know about you, but I don't want to look at my fellow man, woman, and child in that way. You want to talk about living in fear?
Yeah.
We can't live that way. That's not a prescription for healthy living, if there ever was one. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And of course, you and I both know, and probably many of the folks that listen to you regularly know, that there are other ways to remediate and reverse this without risk,
Correct.
without dying from the treatment or suppression. So if we're not afraid, it's not that we are being denialists about what's going on. We're in fact embracing reality that they have been shielded from because they're operating in fear. So we've got to do our best to love one another and send love to even those who misunderstand what we're communicating.
Yeah.
And that is a big challenge now, because fear is so overwhelming them that they can't see or hear our message. So then we have to take it to a deep spiritual place, a spiritual level. And again, the opportunity presents itself now because we're, getting more alone time and quiet time to spend more time in spiritual practice, reading whatever texts inspire you, to be uplifted and to do the good works. So these are some of the things that we talk about turning. It's like, what can we do? How can we uplift? We got to become living examples for living in a way that fear doesn't enter into the equation, so that others will say, at eventually a point, they'll go, why aren't they afraid? I've said this on many shows now too, including my own. Why aren't they asking the homeopaths? Why are you not afraid? Why aren't they asking the herbalist? Why are you not afraid?
Correct.
How about the doctors of chiropractic? Why are you not afraid?
Correct.
And then begin to see that there are reasons, not because they're denying, but because they know how to deal with these ailments and illnesses long before there was this thing. So what's there to be afraid of except the fear induction machinery that would like to enslave us into a behavior that works against our best interest and against our best health and against our immune systems?
Which fear is one of the leading causes of lowering your immune system: anger, division, loneliness, fear, panic, all these things. And that's why Dr. Lorraine Day calls it a psychological warfare. And so, but we're not saying that there isn't anything out there. The boogeyman's not out there. We're not spraying like monster spray underneath our bed saying we're going to be okay. And we're doing this. No, we are out there. I'm being proactive. And one of the things that we've talked about in the classroom is building our immune system, and how when you build the immune system, and there's so many different, and I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll start looking at some of the questions that are being asked. But there's so many variables about how people are responding to the virus. What can you say about that, where I might not respond to it and you might not respond, but I might be a carrier? Now I'm like a redheaded, well, I'm not going to say redhead because redhead is beautiful, monster with one eye. So what would you like to add to that?
I almost don't know. Obviously I don't want to empower those viewpoints, and nor do you. And it's a real challenge. I'm glad I get to do it 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I have a lot of practice kind of communicating our way out and through, but yet I'm still always coming back to, let me give you this disclaimer so that people are not misunderstanding me. Normally I could just kind of go with it, and I'm like, but people aren't necessarily hearing
Correct.
that positive, empowering message, because they're hearing you're not doing what you're supposed to do. We covered even I had a police officer that's a regular in my audience, and he's a good guy, and he confirms things on the local level. He said people are calling the police, turning in their neighbors
I
for
know.
going out too much or for being around too many people. And I'm thinking, in history, we learned about the Stasi of East Germany, obviously the Hitler Youth, and these are horrible things to even have to consider. But the fact is, as Americans are turning in other Americans simply for interacting with one another, or there are churches now that are being called, pastors who are being called criminals because they say, you know what, we want to get together and worship. That was a fundamental reason why America started.
Mm-hmm.
If people came from England and said, you know what, we want to worship in ways that the king won't allow us. And now we're back to the government saying you can't worship in the way you want to worship because you're dangerous to get together in groups. If you separate out everybody this way and make everybody perceive or believe others are criminals or dangerous, again, now you're subject to any suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say far more dangerous, even if you believe this coronavirus is scary and big and bad, as some people are claiming, you are stepping into something far more dangerous by believing the fear mongering and what that causes you to do or not do in terms of behavior.
Correct.
Corrupting your humanity.
Yes. And you know what? And I want to add to this that even if you don't have the coronavirus, if you have anything, a cold, the flu, maybe a upper respiratory infection that might be contagious, we need to practice courtesy, not to cough on people and to, be like hugging all over them. But at the same time, we need to love on one another. And of course, this is pretty symbolic that is happening during Passover, that we've been told we have to stay behind closed doors. You can't even travel to visit your family, even if you know you're well. This is a time where we have got to figure out how we can come together, whether it's virtually, even when we feel that our spirit is crushed. We need to know that the spirit is never crushed. We might think the spirit is crushed. The spirit is always whole. And it's up to us to really reach out and find it in one another and stop with the division. Okay, so with that in mind, let me take I'm seeing some questions here. The first one is from Simranjit. And she says, they say, can you throw some light on model of Imperial College of London and still being forwarded here? How did the stats change from 20,000 to 500,000? Do you think about that?
No, are you just claiming that it quadrupled the number of cases in the Imperial College
It
of London?
says, can you throw some light on model of Imperial College of London?
Yeah, so, I don't know what model she's referring to. I mean, if we talk about the numbers going up exponentially, listen, you weren't testing and suddenly you're testing, the numbers are going to go up. Now, if you don't acknowledge what we've said about the failures of these tests, then you're just going to roll with whatever they're telling you.
Correct.
What I've said about you want to end HIV, stop testing for it because it's nonsense. You want to end the coronavirus scare, stop testing with a test that doesn't validate its presence or absence necessarily, maybe, but it certainly doesn't tell you anything quantitatively about whether you're being overrun by any virus, much less this one. Yes. And then get back to the basic realities of how do we restore health, how do we restore immunity, and how do we respond to genuine pulmonary or lung maladies without risking death. And again, my article that I wrote on this subject,
we're going to post it underneath. We're going to post it. Yeah,
it goes into ways to do that. So am I afraid? You shouldn't be afraid either. But if you're vulnerable, if you smoke, if you're living in fear all the time, your microbiome has been destroyed by years of antibiotics. You were vulnerable before COVID-19 became a thing. Yeah. If this is the thing that motivates you to start living differently, then great. But how long are you going to wait?
Yes. Okay, so with that in mind, I looked down, I didn't see any. If you have a question, type in a Q and I will hone in on that question. So thank you for that, Robert. One of the things that I've become familiarized with, just absolutely adoring Del Bigtree and Andrew Wakefield and and Judy Mikovits, all the things that they're doing to bring awareness to vaccine safety. Mm-hmm. And so I always say I'm not for vaccines. I am for vaccine safety. And if they cannot prove that they are safe, then they need to hold them to a higher level and a higher standard, just like they would do anything. So with that in mind, I would like to talk about the CDC. So all this been going on, the CDC, I thought the CDC was a government agency.
Well,
so can you share the fact that in the name of the CDC is Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, but where's the P in the CDC?
No, I've called them the Centers for Disease Creation and Promotion for many years, more accurately as a title. The CDC operates under I believe the Department of Defense, because you'll see they wear military gear like the Surgeon General in a sense at some level, but
they fall under the Department of, they're not, first of all, they're a nonprofit.
HHS, right?
Yes, Human Services, Department of Health and Human Services.
But the reality is they are, as RFK Jr. says, they're a de facto, pharmaceutical agency, if you will. They promote, they distribute vaccines. They have been, granted billion-dollar budgets for many years now.
11.1 billion is their budget. By the way, I looked it up.
And they were about on the way out until the era of HIV. They needed a reason for being, and of course, then the annual flu scare, which is flu shot season. All of these things, they need the reason to exist, and it's always about the scary infectious disease that it's not Democrat, it's not Republican. So love us and send us money. U.S. taxpayers are on the hook for all of that. Mm-hmm. But they are a cesspool of corruption. Again, RFK Jr., who is not considered a conservative Republican, he's a Democrat liberal, from that Kennedy family, and he says, look, they're a cesspool of corruption with conflicts of interest. And these agencies, and they're captured. We have a revolving door at the highest levels of the agencies, including CDC, between the pharmaceutical industry, like Julie Gerberding, who served for a number of years and helped to really promote Gardasil, one of the most dangerous vaccinations for HPV. And then she went and left the CDC and got a, 5 or 6 figure income with, Merck Pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
She's leading their $5 billion now, much bigger vaccine division. So this CDC is not an agency to revere and trust. Like most government agencies that are captured by industry, you should be very suspicious of their motives and intentions and their methods, other than the toxicologists that they never let come out from the basement somewhere, because that would give us a lot more information about what's really the problem. Just like in the origins of out of Wuhan with the air pollution, the incinerators, the 5G, the experimental vaccines that were happening that manifested as a respiratory outbreak that they wanted to blame on this virus, which, is arguable. Yes, maybe no. But regardless, you didn't need a virus to say these people are going to be very sick and are very sick because of what they're breathing every day. But of course, the virus is typically a cover story for toxic pollution. Mm-hmm. And it means that you don't have to hold anybody accountable because it becomes nature as our enemy. And God created nature, and so God becomes our enemy. We are desecrating our very existence by saying a virus. Now, if you argue this is man-made, then we can go, okay, we can make a modification of that statement. Sure. But in reality, if we believe that the germ theory is the reason why we get sick or why we're not sick, then we have to declare war on nature, because we have within us anything that should rise up and kill us at any moment. There's no explanation for human and animal life if the germ theory is accurate, because we got more things in us and around us and over us all of the time, including a virome. We have endogenous viruses and retroviruses that don't harm us. And so suddenly now viruses are the enemy.
But that's part of the myth that viruses and these germs kill us. But the reality is that if we have a healthy immune system, our body will take care of ourselves, will take care of us, right?
Yes, the law of the terrain. And this goes back to Antoine Béchamp, who was really the genius of his day and of any day. This guy was as smart as anybody that's ever lived. And he established this idea that the terrain, the milieu, the environment is what determines health or disease, not what they call the pathogen. And Pasteur was friends with the emperor. he stole some of his, maybe most of his ideas from Béchamp and bastardized them.
Mm-hmm.
But because he was friends with the emperor, he got all the accolades, and they said, yeah, whatever Pasteur says is right. And so then we became enemies of nature because the germ was out to get us, whatever that might be. Most of it invisible at the time. And even at the time of 1918, when they claimed we were all killed by a pandemic flu virus, how do we know? We didn't even know what viruses were then, hadn't been identified. And then they dig up a dead guy in
Great
Alaska
story.
20 plus years later and say,
Yeah.
what we found in him killed everybody.
Yeah.
And people don't ask questions and go, that seems like a bit of an exaggeration for you to make a definitive statement like that.
Well, it all depends on who's telling the story. Whoever's telling the story and the interpretation, because you follow the money, just follow the money. And I'm telling you, Robert, if I would have met me 10 years ago, I would have thought I was a whack job because, the more and it all started with nutrition and being challenged on the show, about a year after I started, and someone challenged me to go raw vegan. And after 4 days, I felt really good. And I thought, wow, I feel really good. But I didn't feel bad. I didn't know I could feel better. And we have been desensitized to what better is, because everything that's bombarding us is drink this and eat that and do this, take this. And if you want to have your diabetes under control, you take this medication instead of saying lifestyle. And I'm hoping that with us, our conversation today and all the conversations that we've had in the classroom about the coronavirus and anything that we talk about will empower us to say, now's the time to change our lifestyle so that next year we can say, hey, I'm not worried because I've got a healthy immune system. What can you add to that?
It's not a lot. I need to, because you're speaking the truth here. The reality is how you live determines how you live.
Mm-hmm.
And if you live in fear, what will be drawn to you are things that are fearful and disease producing. And the law of the terrain says your environment matters more than anything, and that what manifests in the environment is due to that environment. It starts with your beliefs. So if you have a belief about the divinity of all of life and the recognition that nature didn't make a mistake, God didn't make a mistake, and all these
Correct.
things are here for our benefit,
Correct.
then you don't look at everybody as your enemy. You don't operate in fear. You still have common sense about you. We still practice good hygiene, basic concepts of sanitation, sewage, nutrition, all of these things that manifest a healthy life, a healthy terrain. But we then also have to decide, if we believe that, what are we going to expose ourselves to? Because more dangerous than what they call germs are those who promote fear as a way of life.
Sure.
There are books written about germs. In fact, they say one of was by a medical doctor who wrote, doctors are more dangerous than germs. And they're the stuff they do. And I'm not saying intentionally.
Let's take a moment and just absorb that, because it is true. Through the years, look at all we're like the guinea pigs.
Mm-hmm.
But keep going.
Yeah, so we look at life differently. So unplugging from messages that are denigrating to you, that try to frighten you and to see yourself as something less than you really are, and find outlets like yours, of course, that are uplifting, that are positive, and that's going to support immune function every day better than any drug can, because no drug can really support immunity. It can only force and poison, all of these things to triage you in a crisis. So I think that we've got to make better choices about who we interact with in terms of our media consumption, and of course, in terms of the people around us in our sphere. Right now, we're kind of kept at arm's length from everybody, but maybe there are people that have some sense and sanity about this that are not operating in fear. Find a way to connect, whether it right now be electronically, but find a way to slowly go, you know what, we need to reopen life, because we're closed down to the life force when we live in this level of fear. And of course, that manifests in terms of economy too, because if we destroy the economy and people can't pay to, the rent or their mortgage, or can't buy food, how is that going to be a better situation than right now? Because you're afraid that some vulnerable people may succumb to a bat genetic modified virus. If we're really concerned about those people, then isolate and quarantine them, and then allow everybody else to get on with life and continue to produce and uplift and all of the things. And we're not allowed to be sick. We're not allowed to be in life. And occasionally, you know what? It's part of life.
You
So
know,
the lie being told is oh yeah, if you're sick, that we can't allow that to happen. That's arrogance. That's hubris.
correct. And that's one of the things my point, that if we know that people are going through this virus with different levels of side effects, like, some people are going through it and maybe it's a little bit more taxing on their body and they're down for a couple, 3 days or maybe a week or whatever, which is like the common flu. But then there's the people that have immune compromised systems, and maybe it's not a lifestyle change. Maybe it's because they were born that way. I mean, everybody has their own story. Everybody has their medical history. But those are the people that need to be quarantined so that we can protect them, so that we can have a full economy and a healthy, robust economy. Some
Sure.
people say that this is another distraction because the economy was going to go down, and that this is a way to kind of
Blame
save
the
face.
virus.
Correct. But
Not the Federal Reserve. Exactly. So
No.
those
Let's
are,
just create more money. Let's just
Yeah.
create more money and everything will go away. So before we move forward, I want to acknowledge all the sponsors because, as you know, Robert Scott Bell and the Robert Scott Bell Show and our RSB Media, that it's so important that we find like-minded people that will stand by us and say, we believe in what
Yes.
you're doing. And so I want to ask all of you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com. While you're at whenyouneedafriend.com, please subscribe and follow me, and also check out, my YouTube channel that we send that out to. We upload it after the class is done, but pretty soon, because
be
of
going
Robert Scott
live.
Bell, we're going to go live everywhere. We're going to be live everywhere. Anyway, so the point is that I want to encourage all of you to stay connected through here. This is where we all are one. This is where we take ownership for our life. And so I take more of a spirit, mind, body approach, and we work together. Robert and I, we work together and try not to duplicate one another, but with this, we're all affected.
I could never duplicate you. Never.
Well, thank you. And I could never duplicate you. So I want to acknowledge my sponsors. I want you to go, when you go to whenyouneedafriend.com, and of course, subscribe. Check out the button where it says subscribers like Liberty Health Share, Keep Me Safe Organics. If you talk about the toxicity in our body with just our makeup alone. And so check out Keep Me Safe Organics, First Alternative Care, which is telemedicine for the entire family for $45 a month. And that's your entire household. And that includes dermatology, also non-urgent family practice, and 3 hours a year of behavioral health counseling for the entire household. So check them out. Dr. Stephen Grable, who's complimentary. He is also functional integrative, and he is a graduate of the ACIM with Dr. Lee Cowden. The pharmacy in Merritt Island, Live Longer Medical, who's in Indian Atlantic, Florida, helping us heal from the inside out and the outside in. Ground Therapy, Brain Tap. Oh my gosh, Brain Tap, that helps us rewrite the program that's in us. And you can get a 15-day trial that help you calm down. Go to my shop now and check them out. You can get a free 15 days so that you can start tapping into your brain and rewriting the program. And, please support my sponsors the way that they're supporting the classroom. And finally, you can become an enrolled student and help with $1 a month, whatever you can. Just go to my PayPal account or just click on enrolled student and help out in any way that you can. And so today we're talking with Robert Scott Bell. Of course, check him out too, who's taking the time every day. He is reporting on whatever's happening in the world, which is important too. And so I want to encourage you to go to robertscottbell.com. And you can also find him on YouTube, social media, and Facebook. So with all that being said, we have, let's see, another question. We have a lot of comments that you may want to go back and look at, and if we have some time afterwards, I'll read. Margaret wants to know originally why were vaccines started? So let's go back to the very beginning, shall we?
Yeah, you're going back to Edward Jenner in England.
Yes.
And the Temple of Vaccinia. Now, the vaccine is derived from the word vaca, meaning cow. Okay. So they had smallpox, and somebody observed that, hey, the milkmaids milking the cows that have cowpox were not getting smallpox. So somebody said, hey, let's scrape the udders, let's get the pus and debris, and let's throw that into unsuspecting victims, and we might see something cool happen, right? So they took that pus and garbage, and they cut, and you could see movies about that time period. John Adams, they did a whole thing on HBO years ago or something, and you'll see where they cut open arms, and of course what happened was sepsis and death and infection, and some people, apparently they claim, didn't get the smallpox because of that, and so they said, well, okay, let's do that, we'll call it vaca vaccine, and that was the start. Now, that was also the start of the anti-vaccine movement. As quickly as Jenner brought this out and tried to convince the king and the government this is a good idea, there were people that saw the effects of doing this, the sepsis and death, and they said, not in my body, not in my house. And so the people that think anti-vaxxers just came about last year because the World Health Organization said something, no. As soon as Jenner started doing this, people recognized there's risk to it. Now, it's a little more high tech, but it's still the same concept of throwing, let's say, viruses, pathogens, whatever you want to call it, into a needle that they inject primarily to elicit an antibody response. But the antibodies are not necessary and sufficient all the time for prevention of disease. And if you corrupt your immune system via these injections, you can end up worse off with now 54% of young Americans have chronic diseases.
Yeah.
The healthiest children as a homeopath that I've seen around the world, and I've traveled all over this world, are the least vaccinated or not vaccinated at all.
Correct.
And if you're interested in protecting yourself safely, look into homeoprophylaxis, using homeopathic medicines that sensitize. In fact, yesterday we did an interview with Ananda Moore, the developer or the producer of the film Magic Pills. And it talks about a lot of incidences, but one particular in Cuba, protection against leptospirosis, which is every rainy season they have this disease manifest. And they couldn't get the vaccines. They used homeoprophylaxis instead, and it worked better with no injuries, no deaths, and it lasted even longer. So that book, that documentary is available online too. And in yesterday's show, you can catch the interview.
Awesome. And we'll do that. And so I know that we're getting down, and if you guys have any questions, I don't know how much time you have after the classroom. We usually have after we say goodbye to our podcast, we continue recording on Facebook and YouTube. But if you have a little bit of time, maybe anybody who has more questions or comments to make,
Sure.
we can address them.
My wife hasn't come down and said, hey, where are you? So we're okay.
Well, she'll be the marker. She'll be our marker. And so with that in mind, I want to encourage all of you who are listening on the podcast right now that there's more information that's not on the podcast. So I want to encourage you to join us live on YouTube. I'm forecasting for the future, live on Facebook at Lillian's radio show. And in the future, we'll go live on both. And so these are the things that we can do before we go, because we got 5 minutes left, or I think we got 2 minutes left. Okay, the question I'm going to ask you after the class is done, and we can say goodbye with your last minute words of wisdom. What are the over-reported and under-reported things that you want us to know about the coronavirus? So with that in mind, that's going to be for later after the class is done. So for now, any words of wisdom that you would like to repeat, share about all of the stuff that's going on?
Embrace your divinity, get connected to spirit, however you do it. And remember that living in fear is not living. Living in love and recognizing your spiritual purpose for being here will dissolve all of this nonsense instantly, even if it's real for other people. You have the ability to co-create your life. That is a power that's been granted to you by God, not government, and certainly not the pharmaceutical industry. So embrace that reality, embrace your divinity, and find out why you're here and live that.
And so you've just proven that you can do my job.
I'm feeling it.
Is there anything you do wrong?
I'm feeling it from you.
And so Robert Scott Bell, you can go to robertscottbell.com. He has a book called Unlock the Power to Heal, which was the first interview that we did together many, many, many years ago. And so I want to encourage all of you to take ownership. This is where the good thing about responsibility is that if you create it, you can uncreate it. And we were created with the power to heal. And so we need to harness that power. I'm so grateful to you, Robert Scott Bell, for coming in the classroom today and empowering all of us to know a new truth.
Yeah, happy to be here, and the power to heal is yours.
Yes, the power to heal is yours. And so for those of you who are holding on, stay on. As the teacher's pet, stay always on afterwards. Please know we're going to talk about over and underreported news out there that we have got to embrace. And so thank you so much, Robert Scott Bell, for being such a wonderful teacher today in the classroom. And please remember that we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Robert Scott Bell wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job, Robert.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
I don't know who Trevor is, but he was pretty funny. He said, this Robert guy looks pretty shady.
Totally.
He must be a fan. He must be a fan. For someone to have the courage to say that, he
knows me then. Yes. Keep razzing. I love it.
Yes. And so I want to say thank you to Margaret, Leslie. Thank you so much for all of you who are in the classroom today. Mickey.
That's my mom. She's watching, huh?
Oh, Mickey. Oh my gosh, you did a great job with your son. I think I've said
Mom.
this to you before. And let's see who else is in the classroom today. Eula? Yes, Eula. And
yeah, she's from Poland originally. Be nice to her.
I will be nice. In the classroom, we're always nice because you know what? We're all one. And one of the things, and Deb, thank you so much for coming in the classroom. And let's see, I'm just scrolling down as fast as possible. Okay, so thank you for coming on into the classroom today. I do want to talk about underreported. What do you think is like the most underreported that you think that we need to know?
Well, that most everybody lives. I mean, think about it.
The end of the story. It's just like the BRCA gene, right?
Yeah.
50% of women get cancer would have the BRCA gene, but they never talk about the 50% that don't. What's different? Go ahead.
Exactly. So how do you make the claims that you make that this is the deadliest of, it's like, well, 99.9% of the people live, but that's a story throughout our recent history in terms of the virologists versus those who talk about the immune system.
Yes.
So that's the underreporting.
Okay. Anything else that you want to share?
We talked about some of those things today, the problems with the tests, obviously.
Yes.
They're not reporting on many of the alternatives. That's being underreported. That it's mentioned at all is interesting. I will say that. So anything that is uplifting and empowering and reduces the fear is being underreported. Yes. Not here and not on my show, but, if you talk about what we call mainstream journalism or legacy media.
Yes. Yes. And not in our show, in the classroom either. We've got some great teachers coming on that are reporting us. And like I said to you at the beginning of the class, that I'm looking forward to having another conversation with Dr. Lorraine Day, because I felt a bit nervous about I want life to be a beautiful dream. The row your boat, life is but a dream. So I want to, I want that to happen that way.
I learned it. Propel your craft. Existence is but an illusion. Do you remember that version?
Oh, yes. It was for the group of children who were given the castor oil.
Right.
Okay. So that was underreported. So what about the overreported?
Well, the overreporting is the definitive claims that this is going to be the end of the world as we know it. But
you know what? It is. It is. And here's what I mean by that. The person who runs a marathon,
Mm-hmm.
who starts the race isn't the same person who finishes the race. This person that you're seeing here today, who started a radio show, is not the same person who is now sitting at the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by that.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And take that nuanced perspective and recognize that all life changes in terms of our experience and our perceptions of reality. And in that sense, I would agree that it's different.
Yes.
But the negative connotation is that, we are now moving into a dark time of, medical police state mandates of drugs, vaccines, no movement. And I think that is a very real thing from science fiction, as if it was almost programmed into us to accept that that's our inevitable outcome. And I like to think, and I believe so, because we have the freedom, as I mentioned toward the end of the show, the power to co-create the positive. We have the power to co-create the negative. So in this sense that we are given an opportunity in this time to embrace our divinity better and stronger than ever. When times are great and easy, that's often when we go, who needs God, right? You hear that. It's like, And now suddenly you're challenged, you're threatened, you're in fear, that you come closer to that. You really focus on that area that you may have neglected. And that's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's a panacea to make everything go away, right? Because life is not always, I had many ailments and illnesses and suffering and pains but it was all for me, not happening to me.
Yes.
I didn't know it at the time, but it was for me to teach, to learn, so that I could teach, just as you have experienced so much.
Mm-hmm.
So if we talk about going completely to the negative with this, because there are certainly entities, and I'm sure you covered things like that with Lorraine Day, that are real, but they do tend to cause you to have the fear that we want to alleviate.
Mm-hmm.
Not because we're ignorant or not willing to look at the dark side of reality, but to recognize that it has no power over us when we're coming from that love perspective.
Sure.
And recognizing that people are making choices. So when we talk about, even the controversial subject of vaccines, I know you talk about vaccine safety. For me, it isn't about that. It's about choice.
Correct.
Always about choice. If people want to choose it, safe or not, I might try to dissuade them because of what I know, but I'm not going to violently step in their way if their choice is that. It might be different than mine.
Informed choice. Absolutely.
If they take that opposite view and say, you know what, we're not going to give you the choice to opt out or to not do it ever, that's where we draw the line. We say, you know what, that can get ugly. And I acknowledge that. And that's where we have to be willing to stand up in a courageous manner to speak out against that wrong. We might say vaccines are wrong, but we would say, I defend your right to choose them if you want. But if you say I must have them against my will or religious beliefs, that's a point where we have to be willing to stand up and not cower in fear, because there's more of them that believe in it than those of us who say, you know what, that's not my path.
I love that. And that is so important for us to understand that there is, you know what, when was it? And I don't know if I reached out to you during this time. And it was the morning of, I think either you were going to be in the classroom or maybe it was Dell. And I was preparing to do the class. And, as you know, there's prep time to do even 1 hour or half an hour, or whatever it is that people do. There's a lot of prep time. And I remember the night before this whole thing happened, actually, no, my guest had canceled. And, Dell was going to be coming the following week and I remember waking up that morning and realizing they were censoring my work. And it was the first time that I thought I could put on a uniform. Censorship for us to not be able to inform people. If you think crack cocaine is good for you because you're being told it's good for you and you take it, then that's being deceitful. That's a deception, that people are thinking that things are good for us and we're going to be eating all these foods and getting the vaccine, that it's good for us. But if you're told, if you take crack, this could happen, and you decide to do it anyway, now it's on you. But that's not what's happening with vaccinations.
It's deception. You're right.
Let's talk about real quick, and your wife hasn't come down yet.
Nope,
so not yet. She's probably going to come down now.
She'll text me and she'll say, get up here. But no, okay.
And so with that in mind, what is the latest? Because I know Dell just won a huge lawsuit in the Supreme Court. with the pharmaceutical industry to provide this mountain of evidence of testing that the CDC claims that the vaccines do not cause
Right.
any
Yeah.
harm. So
Yeah.
what is the latest and what can we do to help with this cause to protect ourselves?
Sure. Well, yeah, we found out that just like we suspected, that the CDC's claim of vaccines do not cause autism are not rooted in peer-reviewed medical science or literature, and they demanded that they show what studies there were, and the studies they provided do not show that. So the statement is a deception, as you say. And once again, don't trust the CDC. Why would you? And
Many people do, though,
I know, I
because they
know.
come across as a government agency that is here to protect us.
Yeah, and we would call that a naive, lack of critical thinking, or a lack of knowledge of the history of government and government agencies, and the regulatory capture we discuss, that the drug industry and vaccine industry has captured these agencies. So we have to recognize there are what we call conflicts of interest, which is part and parcel to the knowledge of the peer-reviewed medical literature. You have to reveal your conflicts of interest in any given paper. I declare that this may be a conflict of interest, or I have no conflicts of interest. And the government agencies are rife with conflicts of interest, profiteering, plans of leaving government agencies to go to work for the very industry you're regulating or promoting. And so critical thinking is not being done with those that just blindly trust these agencies because they wear the uniform, they have the mouthpiece, the media parrots that these are the experts. And so when you talk about underreporting, how many times have they interviewed a homeopath, an herbalist, a doctor of chiropractic, a naturopath
Correct.
on any of these health issues?
Correct.
They go to people that have no knowledge of nutrition. And these are the experts for how to protect you and how to build immunity. So, these are, you think like, well, of course, it's kind of silly. Why would we not interview everybody that has a perspective? Well, no, it's only the officials that are allowed, the experts that they claim are allowed to communicate what they say are the official stories, which are there to promote and protect the officials. So, trust in the CDC, those people that do, I don't know how many medicines they're taking already, and that might be a problem, for their ability to critically think. We can't reach everybody, but we've got to reach those who are ready, to put their hand out and say with sincerity, yeah, I'd like some help and assistance here. But don't try to help people that will take your help and use it against you, like those people right now that are calling the police if you go outside for too many times in the day or you're too close to somebody. Those are people that are dangerous, not you and me. The people who are turning others in for their fear of the germ have lost their way completely.
That's how the Germans did it. That's how they were able to make the Holocaust happen for so many years and kill 6 million Jews. And so another thing I'm hearing about is that the coronavirus affects people that are taking ACE inhibitors and that are also vaccinated because they're accelerators that are being injected into our body, that this could be as a result of a pharmaceutical cover-up. And it's not that they've never done this before. The government, with DDT or, other incidences, the Tuskegee, just all these different things, not that they would ever lie to us. How could we believe them? How could anybody?
Yeah, why would you? So, what are we left with? I just, you want to save everybody. I do. But at the same time, life has taught me that it is not your job or my job to do that. We first have to care for ourselves before we can care for one another.
Sure.
And recognize that sometimes if we try to help someone who doesn't want to be helped, that will bounce back on us in a way that harms us. And it's not their fault that they did it. We should have been aware that you were putting yourself into a situation that you were only risking, not helping. And that again comes back to what I said about getting reconnected to spirit, because it gives us the insight, the whispers, the direction to know when to go in to help. Sometimes we're not sure. It's not just a mental construct. It's well beyond that. It's a spiritual communication that says, don't go down that alley. You might have thought, well, it just seems like a regular alley, but something's saying, and in another alley you would normally not go down, Spirit's going, no, that's a safe one. So it's beyond necessarily what you know and don't know sometimes. And I think we discount that and we embrace just the mind, which is a tool, but a horrible, horrible master, if you will, if you put the mind in charge.
Mm.
So the worship of the mind and PhDs and medical degrees, as I call them, has got us in a whole heap of trouble, because all of those people, the experts, they have all of those. They have all the credentials, but they don't know, or if they do know, they're suppressing their knowledge of how to genuinely go through life without succumbing to, again, in this type, a fearful new virus of some kind. Why are the homeopaths not afraid? Why am I not afraid? Why are you not afraid? Start asking those folks, and you'll get information that will be empowering and will not build the fear and shut down the communication with the divine.
Yeah, and I'm respectful of the virus. I'm respectful that why put myself in this kind of health crisis if I don't have to? So I believe that we need to follow the guidelines that we're being given, but these guidelines don't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Who said that liquor stores are an essential store that should be open? Now, I enjoy my glass of wine once in a while, but to be essential, who chooses what is essential and what's not essential?
Right.
All these things just don't make sense to me anymore, and it's not okay. It's not okay, and it is creating conflicts between family, and it is because they don't want to hear it. I used to be that way too. I don't know if you were ever like that. I don't know if you were rebellious on, like I interviewed Dr. Andrew Saul's daughter, Helen. And the first thing she did, she never had a vaccine. She never had an antibiotic. And by the time she went off to college, she decided she was going to do whatever she wanted. And the first thing she did was she got an infection and she went and got antibiotics. And it really hurt her. Yeah. And to the point where she came back, and now she has children that they're not vaccinated. And
Dad was right.
And so I'm praying that eventually people will come around and say, okay, this didn't work, this doesn't work. But what's happening instead is, and okay, I don't know if you've read the book of Revelations, but where it says that daughters will turn against their mothers, and brothers against brother. And so there is this kind of like, oh my gosh, I need to go back to see how it ends, and we know how it's going to end, but the pain that it may cause is what we need to prepare ourselves for through more love.
We'd like to think that we all learn from our quote unquote mistakes or choices. And even better is to learn from others, so you don't have to make the same mistakes and choices, right? That's the next step. But we're given the freedom to screw up royally and get hurt and suffer, and that's a freedom I cherish. So I don't want to take it from anybody else. But again, once they cross the line and say, I can't have that experience, or I have to have this experience, that violates fundamental spiritual principles of freedom of choice, agency, whatever you call it. You mentioned the ACE inhibiting drugs, and I've been covering these things as well. And there was one story about that then said melatonin and I don't know, whatever it was that was supposed to be taken that was better, and that they downplayed or said selenium is not good. And I'm like, so
but
wrong.
They also said silver was not good.
Of course, and these are either misinterpretations or purposefully misleading people. To indicate that selenium as a supplement in a whole food form is anything like the ACE inhibiting drugs is nonsense. It's not how it works. And of course, we know silver is virostatic. It stops viral replication. It can enhance immunity, but it doesn't hyperstimulate it. So it doesn't send you into cytokine storms. And that's the distinction that needs to be made. Again, that's why I wrote that piece, that article that Casey Krejci from Living Fuel asked me to write a couple of weeks ago. It's still valid. If you want to know what I'm doing, there's a link. Hopefully you have that linked up.
I will put it as right after the show. I'll put it in my thank you to you. I'll put it there. So, so I know that I am taking away from your beautiful wife, and I know that you've been at this for many hours. And I want to thank you, Robert Scott Bell, for being a freedom fighter. One of the things, what can we do when it comes to protecting ourselves from this forced vaccination, which it's just my humble opinion that this is what is at the root cause, is, all the people that will stand in line to say, vaccinate me. And then the majority of the people will rule. But what
Yeah.
can we do to make sure that we keep our choice, our freedom of
Learn the
choice?
power of no. Learn the power of no and be willing to stand up for what you believe and let them know that the consequences for violating your no will be very, very, I don't, how do I say it? It will be severe because it's a fundamental right to defend your life and your liberty and your property. That's a fundamental part of our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence here. We've lost our way because we begin to perceive that government is God and that it gets to tell us what our rights are or what they're not. We've seen overturning of religious freedom in California, in New York recently on the vaccine things, a few other states. And if you just go along at that point, what are you going to tell God when you meet God later, right? If you don't talk to him already. Well, yeah, I just didn't feel like I would stand up for the defense of myself or the life of my child because it was just too inconvenient. Too many people felt it wasn't the right thing to do. No, we have to get back to that fundamental principled stance and a way of life that recognizes that we are, part of divinity. We are creatures or creations of God, not government, and stand against such tyranny, even if our fellow Americans are ignorant of that issue, and bring them on, even if they disagree with us and I disagree with them. We should be able to find common ground in defense of
Correct.
freedom. And
Correct.
if we don't, then of course we don't have a lot in common anymore as Americans. And that has happened over many generations now. It didn't just happen overnight. And we've got to do a little better job of raising, or a lot better job of raising our kids and teaching them, to think critically and also how to learn from their own experiences when they leave the nest so that they come back like Andrew Saul's daughter and said, you know what, I learned a hard lesson, but I learned. And,
Yeah.
if we keep them from learning, that's not good either. But we've got to teach them what these lessons mean, how to interpret them, and so that they then can go out and figure it out without us being there. That I guess we got to grow up and respect each other's freedom again.
Yes, yes. And so with that in mind, I've this was a quote that I learned many, many years ago at a retreat that I had gone to. And it's, I myself am just one person, but together we're an overwhelming majority. And let me tell you, Robert Scott Bell, I am so glad that you're part of the team that I'm in, which is, we need to become an overwhelming majority and be the squeaky wheel and the loud voice,
Mm-hmm.
because if not, our rights will be taken away, and then it'll be much harder to get them back.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I want to respect the fact that you need some rest, and you've done a great job. Thank you so much for being on today. And I want to ask all of you to please share, like, follow both of us, because we're doing the same. Well, we're not doing the same things. We're fighting for the same cause, or we're embracing the same cause, because we're not going to fight. We're embracing the same cause, but we have different ways of doing it. So I'm just glad that you are on my side, and that I know that if I need someone to look out for my back, that you're there. And I hope you know that I'll be there for you too.
I appreciate you so much, Lillian. It's great to be on this journey together in this lifetime. And like I said, I'm grateful to know you're doing your thing as well. And we support you and love you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll say goodbye now to Facebook and YouTube. We'll say goodbye.